Imagine opening your fridge and realizing that the price of coffee, meat, and even beer has gone up by 20% overnight. Your brand new car, 30% more expensive. Your cell phone, almost double the price. It sounds like a nightmare, but in 2025, it's closer to reality than you might think. On Wednesday, May 28th, a federal court in Manhattan dropped a nuclear bomb on Donald Trump's economic policy. The Liberation Day tariffs, which he imposed on nearly all of the United States trade partners, were declared illegal. This decision not only threatens to dismantle Trump's trade agenda, but could trigger a global economic crisis, raise prices around the world, and even reignite geopolitical conflicts. So, get ready, because today we're going to unpack what this decision means, why it happened, and what might come next. And if you want to understand how the world really turns, subscribe to the Breakbank channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos. This video is brought to you by TradeSafe, a platform that helps small businesses survive the chaos of international trade. To understand this twist, we need to go back in time. The United States Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, is clear. Congress, not the President, has the power to impose tariffs, taxes, and duties. But since the 20th century, Congress has increasingly delegated that authority to the executive, especially in trade matters. According to the Congressional Research Service, there are currently at least 6 laws that allow the president to impose tariffs without congressional approval. During his first term, from 2017 to 2021, Trump took advantage of 3 of these laws to shape his trade policy: Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and Sections 2011 and 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. Let's break each one down. Section 232 allows the president to impose tariffs for national security reasons, provided they are recommended by the Secretary of Commerce. In 2018, Trump used this law to impose tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, arguing that these industries were vital to American defense. For example, steel is used in tanks and warships, while aluminum is essential for military aircraft. In 2025, he expanded these tariffs, raising the rates to 30% on steel and 15% on aluminum, and including products like automobiles, auto parts, and even semiconductors. These tariffs hit allies like Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, who retaliated with tariffs on American goods such as whiskey, jeans, and motorcycles. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, these retaliations have cost American companies around $12 billion per year in lost exports since 2018. Section 2011 allows the president to impose trade barriers to protect domestic industries that are being injured or threatened by imports. During his first term, Trump used this law to impose tariffs of up to 30% on Chinese solar panels and washing machines. These measures are still in effect and have increased prices for American consumers. For example, the average cost of a solar panel rose by 15%, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, impacting the U.S. renewable energy sector. Section 301, on the other hand, allows tariffs against countries that violate trade agreements or engage in unfair, unreasonable, or discriminatory trade practices. Trump used this law in 2025 to impose tariffs of up to 50% on a wide range of Chinese products, citing practices like state subsidies and intellectual property theft. Interestingly, the Biden administration had already used the same section in 2024 to tax strategic goods like electric vehicles, batteries, and medical equipment, showing that this tactic is not exclusive to Trump. These tariffs, while controversial, had a defensible legal basis. Protecting the steel industry can be justified as national security, and China's trade practices are widely viewed as unfair. But the Liberation Day tariffs, announced in 2025, went a step further and a risky one. They included a blanket 10% tariff on all U.S. imports, elevated tariffs of up to 50% against China, and specific tariffs against China, Canada, and Mexico, supposedly to combat fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration. These tariffs were not based on traditional trade laws, but on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, known as IEEPA. IEPA allows the president to impose trade restrictions after declaring a national emergency. Trump had already used this law during his first term to impose tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada, claiming that the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants represented a crisis. In 2025, to justify the Liberation Day tariffs, the White House argued that the U.S. trade deficit, which reached $750 billion in 2024, was a national emergency. They also cited fentanyl trafficking, which killed 100,000 Americans in 2023, according to the Centers for Disease Control, as another justification. But these arguments were weak. IEPA defines emergencies as unusual and extraordinary threats originating outside the United States. The trade deficit, which has existed for decades, doesn't fit that definition. It's a common economic phenomenon, not a sudden crisis. As for fentanyl, trade tariffs have no direct impact on drug trafficking, which occurs mainly through illicit channels, not legal imports. Economists at the Brookings Institution point out that tariffs may actually worsen trade deficits by increasing domestic prices and reducing export competitiveness. Almost immediately after Liberation Day, the Center for Liberty Justice, a nonpartisan organization, filed a lawsuit against Trump's executive order, representing 5 small American companies that import goods affected by the tariffs, such as electronics, clothing, and processed foods. 12 Democrat-led states, including California and New York, also filed lawsuits, claiming the tariffs violated the Constitution and IEPA. On Wednesday, May 28, 2025, a panel of 3 judges from the U.S. Court of International Trade in Manhattan issued a unanimous decision. The IEPA-based tariffs were illegal. The judges argued that while fentanyl trafficking could be considered an emergency, the tariffs did not directly address that issue, as IEPA requires. On the trade deficit, the court was unequivocal. It does not constitute a national emergency, and Trump had no authority to use IEPA to impose unlimited tariffs. The court ordered the administration to end the 10% global tariffs, the elevated tariffs against China, and the fentanyl-related tariffs against China, Canada, and Mexico, giving 10 days to comply until June 7, 2025. The Trump administration reacted with outrage. White House spokesperson Kush Desai stated, "It is not up to unelected judges to decide how to deal with a national emergency." The Department of Justice filed an appeal the same day, seeking a stay to keep the tariffs in place during litigation. If an appellate court grants the stay, the tariffs could remain in effect for months as the case progresses to the Supreme Court, which has a history of favoring Trump's executive authority in cases like Trump versus United States in 2024. What does this mean for the future? Let's explore 4 possible scenarios in detail. First, if the decision is upheld, it will be a devastating blow to Trump's agenda. Companies that paid tariffs will be entitled to refunds with interest, costing the public treasury up to $60 billion in 2025, according to the Tax Policy Center. This could force cuts to federal programs or increase the budget deficit, which already exceeds $2 trillion. More importantly, without the tariffs, Trump would lose a crucial tool to pressure trade partners, as he did with Mexico in 2019 when tariff threats forced immigration concessions. This could weaken his America First policy, which relies on aggressive negotiations. Second, if the decision is overturned, especially by the Supreme Court, Trump could maintain or even expand the tariffs. This could escalate global trade tensions. China, which has absorbed 50% tariffs, may retaliate with duties of up to 30% on American products such as soybeans, pork, and technology, as it did in 2018. This would cost U.S. agricultural exports about $15 billion annually, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The European Union and Canada could also intensify retaliation, raising consumer goods prices by up to 10% in Europe and 5% in Canada, according to the World Trade Organization. Third, Trump could seek legal alternatives. The court suggested Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows tariffs of up to 15% in response to persistent trade imbalances. However, these tariffs require congressional review after 150 days, and the Republican Congress of 2025, with a more independent faction, might resist. For example, senators from agricultural states like Iowa and Nebraska have already criticized the tariffs for hurting grain exporters who lost 10% of their sales to China in 2024. Fourth, a prolonged trade war could lead to a global recession. The International Monetary Fund estimates that if the 10% global tariffs persist, global economic growth could fall from 3% to 1.5% by 2030, costing $1 trillion in lost output. Developing countries like Brazil would be severely affected. Trump's tariffs raised the prices of imported goods in Brazil, such as electronics and automobiles, by 12%, according to the National Confederation of Industry. China's retaliation, which imposed 20% tariffs on Brazilian soybeans, reduced exports by 7%, costing $2 billion in 2024. In Africa, Countries like Nigeria, which rely on American machinery imports, are facing 15% cost increases, delaying infrastructure projects. The impacts go beyond the economy. In Europe, tariffs raised manufacturing costs as steel and aluminum became more expensive, affecting automakers like Volkswagen and Renault, which cut production by 5%. In Asia, Japan, a major car exporter to the US, saw sales fall by 10% due to automobile tariffs. In India, small businesses relying on American electronic components are facing supply chain delays, increasing production costs by 8%. These cascading effects could destabilize global supply chains already weakened by the 2020 pandemic and the 2022 energy crisis. This video is brought to you by TradeSafe, a platform that helps small businesses navigate the maze of international trade. Here are 3 reasons to use TradeSafe. First, it offers real-time analytics tools that show how tariffs affect your costs, saving up to 20% in logistics expenses. Second, it connects you to a network of consultants in over 50 countries, specialized in trade regulations. Third, it's affordable, with plans starting at $10 a month and an app that simplifies import and export management. What's coming next? In the short term, the Justice Department's appeal may keep the tariffs in effect for months as the case moves through higher courts. If the Supreme Court, with its conservative majority, sides with Trump, the tariffs could be reinstated, intensifying the trade war. In the long term, Trump may pursue bilateral agreements, like the one he signed with Japan in 2019. But these require concessions that could be politically costly. Alternatively, he might pressure Congress to pass new laws expanding his trade authority, though this could face resistance from moderate Republicans. For consumers, the immediate future means higher prices. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research estimates that the Liberation Day tariffs have already increased the cost of consumer goods in the U.S. by 3%. And you, what do you think? Will Trump manage to keep his tariffs, or will the court ruling change the game? Leave your opinion in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to Breakbank to stay updated on everything shaping the future of the global economy. Don't let the world catch you off guard.